Hi there, what lurks beneath. My name is Gale, and I'm here to tell you about some sightings that I've had all throughout the swamps of Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, and even parts of Florida. I've had the luxury of living throughout the entire country in multiple states. To name a few: New Mexico, Oregon, Colorado, Texas, New York, and of course Louisiana. Now, they say Louisiana is actually a hotbed for paranormal and witchcraft, but it's also home to terrors of the swamp, as I like to call them, because they're things that once you see, you wouldn't believe them if nobody told you about them. Most people won't believe me, but I've seen some crazy stuff out in the swamps. Things that you think can only appear in your nightmares. But no, you would be so wrong to assume otherwise. Creatures that can kill you, worse than moccasins or alligators. One time, I was actually out in the bayous with thick smog rolling in, and I seen this, I kid you not. What I didn't know at the time was I thought it was a massive alligator, but it was actually an alligator humanoid. But as this thing rose out of the water and grabbed this 5-foot alligator and tore it into pieces, I was able to get a much better sight. It looked to be part man, part alligator, so I kind of call it the alligator man. But this thing was a hulking demon. It had to have been at least 10 feet tall, covered in thick muscles, rippling, scales everywhere, and a massive hulking body. I'm talking like a football player on steroids, maybe 4 to 5 feet at the shoulder width, completely hulking and massive like I said. It's terrified me to death, and that's only one instance that I've seen. Luckily, this thing was too busy eating an alligator to really pay attention to me rowing by. I've seen Dogman out here in the swamps too. That's why there's just certain spots that I refuse to go to, because they are very intelligent predatory animals. I've been followed by what I assume was a pack of them. They were staying just beyond the reach of the trees, keeping an eye on me, and at times when I'd look just right, I could see the faint glow of their eyes staring at me, making sure I wasn't wandering too far off from whatever trap they were setting up ahead. See, the swamps are just not meant for people. They aren't meant for human survival, period. I believe that even some of the native tribes had a hard time surviving deep in the swamp. In fact, depending on who you talk to, they'll give you some pretty hair-raising details about bog creatures and other things that live below the swamp waters. Everything from summoning and witchcraft to flesh and blood creatures. There's all sorts of terrors out here, especially at nighttime. Where do you think fiction pulls a lot of their ideas from? I've had the misfortune of seeing many of these swamp creatures myself to understand their existence, as well as to know where Hollywood gets their inspiration from. In fact, many of my close friends that I've acquired over time are also avid adventurers of the swamp, and have their own encounters with what they refer to as the skunk ape, something many might not know of unless they live down here in this giant swamp area. I haven't seen one yet myself, but I've seen enough of the other horrors in these parts that it's more than enough for me. I don't really believe in Bigfoot, but I would imagine that they too live down here. I don't live in the swamps anymore, but I've spent enough time to know what I'm talking about. Again, there's just certain parts of the area that you kind of just want to stay away from. And believe it or not, too many people will go out venturing too deep into the swamp. Number 1, it's just not safe. And number 2, you tend to run into things that let you know that you're too far out. Like the crocodilian humanoids, for example. I've only ever seen one, but it was enough for me. Somehow, I came across your videos before messaging you, and I happened to click on one of the reptilian videos. It was about an older gentleman who, just like me, wandered out into the thick bayous and encountered these same humanoid beings. That's how I know I'm not crazy. When I'm hearing written and verbal accounts of other people reciting the same sightings that I've had, the same details of the same creatures, it just means they're out there, and we are not supposed to be in their territory. I try to take the native approach on the whole thing. If you respect them, hopefully they'll just leave you alone. But be aware, they are the alpha predators of the swamp, along with Dogman and whatever else lives out there. It's not just the entire Louisiana area, either. Some of the sightings I've had span all the way into southern Alabama and the surrounding areas. It can be incredibly dangerous, even more so at nightfall. A very close friend of mine, who's actually far more of an adventurer than I am, encountered what he believed to be a den of some sort of large predatory animal, or animals. He was deep and far out in the swamps, near Texarkana, actually. For those who don't know, that's right around the border of Texas and Arkansas, in a small town called Texarkana. I could be wrong on my geography, so if you know that I'm wrong, please correct me. But anyway, I want to say he was either north or east of this location. He did not give me exact coordinates, but he found this dugout, as he describes it, and that led into a very large tunnel, wide enough and tall enough for him to slightly crouch and go into. He said that it led probably about 30 feet down at a sharp slope and dropped off into a very large open room. The entire room was completely dug out, is how he described it, with a ceiling taller than his head, probably around 10 to 12 feet in height, if he had to guess. That was probably about 20 to 30 feet in length. Again, these are just guesstimates. He only had a tiny flashlight, so he couldn't see well, but he said the odor was unlike anything that he's ever smelled before. It was an overpowering smell of death, blood, and rot, like that room had just been filled full of carcasses left to rot in the swamp. However, upon shining his light and looking around a little bit, he couldn't find any trace or source of the smell, but he did see that at the other end of this dugout room, the tunnel led deeper into this den, which he didn't continue to go down. He said he got a really bad feeling in the pit of his stomach, like he needed to leave now, or that something was going to be approaching him very soon. Safe to say he got out of there, and luckily, in one piece. But it just goes to show you, there are things in the swamp that we should stay away from. What's kind of eerie is when he was explaining to me the details of this den, and how it was dug out, and the way it was dug out. He said it almost appeared to be dug out with a tool-like object, that it wasn't just hands, or it wasn't just like an animal had dug it out with their claws. I don't know. The whole thing is very disturbing to hear. And he said, why would there be a person that dug out a chamber that large? And even though I've seen my fair share of stuff out in the swamp, this is a man who is far hardier than I am. In fact, when he was a little younger, he nearly had his right leg taken off by an alligator by surprise. So he doesn't scare easily. And when he tells me he was terrified and could feel in his gut that something was wrong and he needed to leave, that's really saying something. I take his opinion and word very seriously. He's never let me down and doesn't make up stories like this. He's not that kind of guy. When I prompted him with more questions about the den, he said that again, he has no idea how many chambers or pathways this thing went down into. But the pathway he could see that looked like it led down into another chamber, he said he felt like there might be something down there. But he did not hear anything, any movement, any shuffling, nothing. Only the ghastly strong odor of death and blood, and again, with no source of the smell. After he got out of there, he said it was even more humid and dank in there than you can imagine it being, since the swamp is already pretty bad. This friend is also one of the same friends who has had multiple run-ins with a skunk ape too. And trying to think about it, trying to think logically, of course, I can't attribute that den to a cougar, beavers, or bears, or any other natural animal that occurs in the swamp. So I really have no idea what would build a chamber that large, or a tunnel, mind you, with not even their bare hands or claws, but some sort of tool object like what he described. This same friend knows well about my own encounters with what I call the alligator man, the same creature that I saw pick up a 5 to 6 feet alligator, tear it in half, and eat its guts right in front of me, rising up out of the water in the thick fog. And to think, had I just rowed a little bit over, I would have landed right on top of this thing, and it would have capsized my tiny little boat in the swamp. Scary. I felt sending you this email was very important, since you already seem to have a wealth of knowledge and information that you're sharing and putting out there anyway. I thought I would send you mine and add to the ever-growing pile, so that way people who have these sightings and experiences don't bottle themselves up and feel crazy and feel like a lunatic having to keep all this information inside their head. Because I'm telling you now, you gotta let it out. Other people deserve to know that this kind of stuff is out there, and they need to protect themselves and understand the true dangers of being out in thick wooded areas. I'll keep you up to date and let you know if I encounter anything else, or if any of my friends have any more horrifying stories they can share. Many of them do, so I'll go ahead and reach out to them in the coming weeks and see if I can't muster up anything from them worthy enough to share with you. Anyway, this is Gale signing out. I'll keep you up to date and let you know if anything else happens. Have a good one, and thank you again for all the information and hard work you put out.